our next speaker, who is Dr. Tomeka Robinson, who's going to share with us about what is Black Lives Matter and why is this happening. So Dr. Tomeka Robinson is an associate professor of rhetoric and public advocacy and the director of forensics in the Department of Writing Studies and Rhetoric. Courses in intercultural, organizational, and health communication. Dr. Robinson's scholarly interests lie at the intersections of health, culture, and policy. Dr. Robinson has taken an active role in professional and civic organizations throughout her career. She is currently one of the founding members of the Long Island Community and Academic Research Partnership, which focuses on bridging the gap between the community and academics on the issues of health disparities. She is also on the executive boards of the Interstate Oratorical Association and Southern and Northern Atlantic Forensics Youth. She's also a member of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee of the National Forensic Association and part of the National Developmental Conference on Individual Events Planning Committee. So please help me welcome Dr. Robinson.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you on today. And I am going to talk with you a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. So all of us have heard the phrase Black Lives Matter at this point. Streets are being painted with the phrase, and you cannot turn on the TV without hearing some conversation about the topic. However, there are still so many that do not understand the phrase, and even some that view it as hate speech. So today, my purpose is to provide some more insight and context into the Black Lives Matter movement. So in 2013, 3 Black women organizers, Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created a Black-centered political movement building project called Black Lives Matter. This was following the 2013 acquittal of George Zimmerman, a Florida man who had shot and killed Trayvon Martin, an unarmed Black teenager, the preceding year. Garza took to social media the night of the acquittal, stating in part, "Black people, I love you, I love us, our lives matter." A year later, Michael Brown, another unarmed Black teenager, was shot and killed by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. As we know, this police officer was also acquitted. Shortly thereafter, the internet was filled with messages of outcry and support that included the hashtag Black Lives Matter, as people took to the streets of Ferguson and St. Louis to protest this acquittal and were brutalized by law enforcement, criticized by the media, tear gas and pepper sprayed night after night. Seeing this violence, the Black Lives Matter co-founders organized a national ride during Labor Day in Ferguson called the Black Lives Matter Ride. In 15 days, they developed a plan of action to head to the occupied territory to offer support. Over 600 people gathered. After leaving Ferguson, the co-founders saw a need to continue organizing and building Black power across the country, as people were hungry to galvanize their communities to end state-sanctioned violence against Black people. In the aftermath of Ferguson, national attention turned to the killings of other Black men, women, and unfortunately children, such as Eric Garner in Staten Island, New York, Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio, and Sandra Bland in Prairie View, Texas. As the Black Lives Matter movement developed through 2013 and 2014, they utilized it as a platform and organizing tool. Other groups, organizations, and individuals use this platform to amplify anti-Black racism across the country in all the ways it shows up. The Black Lives Matter movement is an ideological and political intervention where, according to their website, in a world where Black lives are systemically and intentionally targeted for demise, it is our affirmation of Black folks' humanity, our contribution to the society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. This project is now a member-led global network of more than 40 chapters. So people who do not follow the movement usually become aware when news sites report on actions or protests that they attribute to the movement, whether this is true or false. What many people do not realize is that the movement is not just about protests, but also embraces policy change and legislation as necessary elements. One common misconception about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's leaderless. But there isn't just one leader, there are many. Black Lives Matter is composed of many local leaders and many local organizations, including the Black Youth Project 100, the Dream Defenders, the Organization for Black Struggle, Hands Up United, and Millennium Activists United, just to name a few. Another misconception is that the movement is solely for protests. However, the many people and organizations involved with the movement have produced detailed policy demands and proposals for institutional reforms. For example, Campaign Zero outlines a list of policy demands and proposals for institutional reforms largely focused on ending police brutality. But police brutality is not the only focus of advocates of Black Lives Matter. Another organization, the Movement for Black Lives, which is a collective of more than 50 other organizations, advances a platform covering 6 areas of domestic police reforms, which include economic justice and investment in equitable education and healthcare, instead of putting all of the funds into criminalization and incarceration. Despite all of this incredible work, however, there are some that view the movement as being violent, seeking to sow a racial divide and intent on interrupting the work of police officers. For example, Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, said in a television interview that the movement is inherently racist and divides us. He further stated, "They don't mean Black Lives Matter. They mean let's agitate against the police matters." And more contemporarily, President Donald Trump called New York City's decision to paint Black Lives Matter on Fifth Avenue a symbol of hate. Another criticism of the movement is that it should be more like the civil rights movement of our textbooks that we've learned about of the 1950s and 1960s. But it's important to note that the same criticisms being leveled against the leaders of Black Lives Matter were also leveled against Dr. King, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and other civil rights activists and groups. These critiques include that the protesters cause unrest, they don't respect authority, and do more harm than good by taking to the streets and causing problems. We have seen these critiques on the news and in media, and we've seen similar critiques lodged against Colin Kaepernick and others that took a knee during sporting events. But what the photos of these past civil rights movement marches, while they're great, what the media and others don't want to talk about is that the police dogs and fire hoses that followed each of these marches as well. Still, perhaps the gravest criticism and misunderstanding of the movement stems from a failure to acknowledge the conditions that created the resistance. In a speech given at the 2016 BET Awards, activist and actor Jesse Williams stated, "If you have a critique for the resistance, for our resistance, then you had better have an established record of a critique of our oppression. Without an understanding of the ever-present effects of slavery and the systems that have been built to protect and preserve the devaluing and oppression of Black bodies. Black Lives Matter and any other movement for rights concerning people of color in this country will never be understood." This context is necessary to understand why in 2020, the movement is still called Black Lives Matter, because historically, Black lives have not mattered. Lastly, the most common criticism leveled against the Black Lives Matter movement is that the movement is racist because it focuses on Black people. The Black Lives Matter hashtag is often met with the counter slogan, "All Lives Matter." And while some would argue that this makes the message more universal, the All Lives Matter counter slogan is inherently racist because it depoliticizes and deracializes an entire movement. The movement is literally to underscore and provide tools for advocacy and organization to analyze the ways that Black bodies have been systemically targeted and erased in this country, whether through the criminal justice, education, or healthcare systems. All lives cannot matter if Black lives do not. We must educate the critics about the conditions that ignited the resistance. And that's why we're talking about it today. The Black Lives Matter movement is rooted in the deeply humanistic view that all lives are interconnected. All oppression, including that of LGBTQ individuals, refugees, immigrants, Muslims, Jews, women, people living in poverty, and people with disabilities, negatively affects all lives. So yes, I proudly say Black Lives Matter, and I promote the liberation for all of us. And that's what the movement really is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. That was great. Does anyone have any questions? We have about 5 minutes if anyone wants to ask Dr. Robinson anything. No? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I do. Why do people find all lives matter like wrong to a protest of Black Lives Matter?
Yes, so the reason why it's wrong is because it's taking away the purpose of the movement. It's not saying that other lives don't matter. There is there's an also that is implied in the term Black Lives Matter. So it's really focusing on the ways in which oppression and racism have affected Black bodies. And notice I didn't say African American bodies, because Black bodies includes lots of different people, including people of Latinx heritage, from Africa, of lots of different areas. So it really shows that when you change it to all lives, it's taken the focus off of what the purpose is really to address what is happening to Black people in the US.